Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to another lecture of public finance. And in the last lecture, actually, we ended one major milestone, and we reached the end of public expenditure, basically. And it was interesting discussing various topics in that public expenditure and how we evaluated them and how various outcomes are decided, how projects are evaluated, and what are the various effects of government actions in the economy. And based on that, in the last lecture, we were ending the topic of government expenditures. We were discussing the impact of health insurance on individuals' behavior and the market efficiency as well. So we discussed that. Then we discussed what are the basic problems with health insurance. One of the problems we discussed was the asymmetry of information. Asymmetry of information is basically that the healthcare providers have more information than the patients. So that might result into an increase in the quantity demanded. Then we again discussed the point of adverse selection. Adverse selection was in a sense on part of insurance companies. Individuals who have for example riskier health, they have expectation of more expenditure on their health in the future. They might result into taking up insurance through insurance companies, and their insurance premiums would be higher than the rest of the individuals. So that would drive up higher insurance premiums in the market overall. So what would happen is that those individuals who are healthier, they would not consider taking health insurance, and that would further, since the quantity being supplied would reduce, and the health insurance companies would have to meet up their expenditures through these individuals who are paying the higher premiums. The end result would be the premiums would go up, and they would be trapped in a vicious cycle where many insurance companies might go bankrupt. So this was a very important scenario that we discussed. Then we also discussed that because of third-party payments, since individuals are not the one who actually bear the expenses of their medical treatment from the hospitals, and since the hospitals know that these individuals are not the ones who are going to pay for it, so because of the third-party payment, if I am insured, I would only evaluate the health services based on the fraction of amount, which is actually the co-insurance amount that I would be paying. So I would be evaluating service on that, and since the price faced by me would be very low because I'm insured, my quantity demanded would increase. So any facility of such cheaper medical services provided by the government would result into increased demand for health services, and again would result into increased cost of providing those services. So I would be least pushed by the cost. And then another scenario that why insurance costs, or for example health services costs, are increasing would be because due to after getting the insurance, people would be having for example behaving irresponsibly, in a sense that they would not take care of their health anymore, because they know that they are not the ones who are going to afford any medical treatment for them. So all of these things would accumulate together and cause the increase in the health services cost, plus some certain other individuals, for example, plus some other causes of this can also be, for example, malpractice insurance by the doctors, which causes the increase in insurance premiums for the patient as well. And then there is cost on treatment of uninsured patients, and then there are excess resources that are being employed in that sector that would result into technological advancements, and certain technological advancements might not be required. So they would again increase the cost of health insurance. And then why worry about these higher costs is that because any cost that is being inefficient resource allocation would result into because the costs are very high and there are excess returns being in, for example, health service provision. So that would result into more resources being allocated into that area, and every resource that is allocated, there is an opportunity cost to that resource, and that opportunity cost is borne by the society. There might have been better use of those resources, either financial or physical or human or labor or capital or whatever that is. So that would mean that higher cost in terms of increase in insurance would is bound. It should be checked and it should be considered. It should be observed very carefully. Another aspect, for example, is the co-insurance rate. Actually, co-insurance rate is the rate at which that, for example, I am being insured for the medical services. Then there is a certain amount of the total medical treatment that I would have to pay. That is the co-insurance rate. So at low co-insurance rate, automatically, as I discussed earlier, that I would be evaluating the provision of total health facility based on the price that I am paying. So that would automatically mean that I would increase my quantity demanded. So if the co-insurance rate is increased and I would pay a greater fraction of the total services being provided, so that would make me evaluate those services based on the price that I am paying. And in that example, I discussed that, for example, the co-insurance rate was 5% before. It can be increased to 30% or 25%. 5% would mean that out of 100 rupees of an expense, I would only pay 5 rupees, while 30% would mean that out of 100 rupees of medical expense, I would only pay I would pay 30 rupees. So now my quantity demanded would reduce. So would since the quantity demanded has reduced, the quantity supplied would be reduced also. We do not reach the equilibrium level, which is the point where marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost, but we would be very closer to that, and the total social loss or to net loss to the society would reduce from a bigger area to a smaller area, since quantity demanded is being reduced. Then we discussed, after closing this topic, as I said, that we closed this box and we opened a new one, and we started with the government finance. And government finance is basically, because of all the operations of the government, that whole big machinery, in order to operate efficiently, it needs resources, and that oil to the machine is actually the revenue by the government, and which is fed in the system, and that revenue comes from the various sources. And we were actually discussing those various sources of revenues when I ended the lecture due to time constraint, and from here onwards we start on the discussion on the government finance, that how does government finance its operations, because on one hand it needs to keep the country safe in terms of national defense, then it needs to keep the country organized in terms of law and order and security and safety, then it needs to also provide facilities for the poor as well, the people who are not very economically blessed, and they also need to be their standards need to be raised. So there are many programs by the government in that sense also. So the whole scenario that government, in order to carry out all these activities, governments need to provide to be provided with the revenue with which they can finance this activity. So government finance is a very important aspect. And sorry, one thing that I missed out of that whole discussion is, apart from national defense and apart from safe environment, they also need to create opportunities for the private sector to operate based on the infrastructure that the government has provided. They also need to create opportunities for the foreign direct investment inflow in the country. They also need to sustain certain sort of optimal relationships with other countries as well, so that they can trade and they can they can invest in them, and the investment comes into our home country as well. So all this machinery, in order to operate successfully, it needs revenues, and those revenues are generated from the economy as such through various mechanisms. So we were discussing those mechanisms, and we started with the introduction to the government finance topic, and we basically discussed that there are generically 3 tiers of the government. Over here on the slide you can see that it is federal, state and local government. But in our case, they are actually local government bodies, then there are provincial governments, then there is a federal government. So these three types of government tiers operates to provide various facilities, various resources to the economy. Then in order to provide those resources, they need to tap certain sources of revenue also, and all of them have their different jurisdiction. Some of them might be able to collect road tax, and the other one won't be collecting road tax. Income tax goes to the federal government directly. It does not go to provincial or local governments, but no doubt that is collected by the federal government. But later on, in order to finance activities of provinces, their deficits are financed by the government. Federal government is lender of last resort for the provincial governments also. While on the other hand, the local governments, it is said that mostly local governments do not get bailout packages from provincial governments, just like the provincial governments get the bailout packages from the federal government. This all turns out into a very big scenario in which in the end people vote based on the actions of governments, and most of all people vote for local bodies and provincial bodies, and then federal government also based on their past actions or based on the results of their actions. So it is very important to see the sources of the government revenue and discuss that. Now, basically, the sources of revenue are taxes, and taxes are user charges for government services. And this slide was actually shown in the last lecture also, but since we ended this discussion somewhere in the middle, so I would like to continue from here onwards to start the topic of government revenue. And by starting this main discussion is that what is the difference between goods and services provided by the government and the goods and services provided by the market. Now, whenever goods and services are provided by the market, that would mean that if I go and buy a mobile or some USB or some pen from the market, there is a price that I immediately pay for that use of that product. But in case of use of government services, for example police services or national defense or less pollution or any other services, I do not pay immediately. So what happens is, or maybe the use of road, all of this means that I do not pay immediately. So the link between price and the quantity used is missing over there. So the prices in the market are acting as a means of rationing that product, that at certain price I would be able to buy, and above that price I won't be able to buy. So they can ration the quantity, and who would get that quantity, who would get that product. But in case of government services, one thing is that taxes are not the prerequisites of provision of that quantity, and the second thing is that this link is missing over there, and the link is actually financed through taxes. The prices are the taxes that are paid by us, but we do not see the tax payment as we do not pay tax on the counter every time we use the road actually, or we do not pay tax every time when we use, for example, motorway. The amount of toll on the motorway is not enough to finance that whole big 400 or 500 kilometer roads maintenance. So that toll does not account for the safety that is provided by the motorway police or the service authorities over there. That facility, that toll does not account for all the services for all the beautification that is done along that road, all the information that is displayed on the signboards, and all of those are required to be maintained. So a toll of 300 or 400 rupees is not enough to finance those activities. There are also taxes for that. So the main thing is over here that I use that service, but I do not immediately pay for it, but I do not see the link over there. So that is missing when in terms, that is the fundamental difference between products and services provided by the government and the products and services provided by the private sector in the market. Maybe we see the price tag on electricity use or gas use or such government services, but we do not see price tags on national defense or police services or judiciary services or roads and motorways, and there are so many other public goods that we do not see price tags on. Then there is a list on this slide of various sources of revenue for the government finance. One of them is taxes. Taxes are of various types, like they can be income taxes or payroll taxes or excise duties or for example property taxes and estates and tariff taxes and tariffs. All these are taxes basically that are designed to provide government with the revenue of the services that they provide. Then there are also, for example, fees and tuition payments, and then there are licenses that people need to acquire. So all of these are basically the sources of government revenue, which help the government to operate its machinery to work. So how much we are taxed also affects many other things. There is a list of 3 things which are actually directly affected by the amount how much we are taxed. Now, first of all, it affects the political equilibrium, because taxes is tax share and voting choices are directly related to each other. If I am taxed excessively and I think that that tax is unfair, that would mean that I would not vote for the same political candidate or same policy makers next time there is a voting. So voting outcome or the political equilibrium might change, voting behavior might change based on the tax share of each and every individual, and we discussed that extensively while we were discussing the political process, which was one of maybe 2 or 3 lectures, and through that political process we discussed that the outcome is dependent on the tax share, or we also call that tax price. If that tax price was above the marginal benefit that is acquired by the individual, that individual would not vote or would not choose to have that outcome. It won't be his or her preferred outcome. So if marginal benefit is equal or above the tax price, then that individual would choose to vote. And we studied various voting outcomes based on that, unanimous voting, for example, majority rules and minority rules, and we saw that how political equilibrium was defined based on the relationship between marginal benefit and marginal cost to that individual. So tax share is one of the marginal cost, marginal private cost to an individual, and it can define the next political outcome or political equilibrium. Then taxes also affect the market equilibrium and its efficiency, with which resources are employed in the private use. So actually what happens over here is, we would discuss that later on in terms of taxation of one of the products to see what happens to the equilibrium outcome. What happens is that if the tax is on a certain product, there is a sales tax that is to be collected, the equilibrium price of that product might be 100 rupees. So if there is, let's assume to an extreme that if there is 20% tax, now the price offered would be 120 rupees. Now that supplier won't be getting the 120 rupees. That equilibrium price was 100 and he would still be getting 100. But the consumer would be paying a higher price for that. Previously he was paying, for example, 100 rupees. Now he would be paying 120 rupees. So that sales tax goes to the government, but that does not stay with the for example with the supplier of that product. So what happens is that political equilibrium, which was 100 rupees, has been distorted by this tax, and it is affecting the efficiency of the market. So this is how the amount how much we are taxed actually in terms of market equilibrium, it affects the efficiency with which the resources are employed in the private use. And secondly, distorted prices might result in inefficiency also. So how much we are taxed also affects the market equilibrium outcome, because it changes the market equilibrium outcome. Market equilibrium is actually by definition the price that I am willing to pay for a certain quantity, and if it is an equilibrium price, that would mean the supplier is willing to supply that quantity at that price. Now both of them have found an agreement in terms of the equilibrium, but when the government intervenes and then applies a tax, so that equilibrium price is distorted, and that distort in equilibrium price might result into, for example, decreased quantity by me, because at 100 rupees I would maybe let's assume that the price of for example a dollar pen is 30 rupees. Now at that 30 rupees there is a general definition by all the people that this is how much they would buy, and the quantity would be defined, and the quantity would be defined by the supplier. Now if there is a tax on that, maybe the price increases to 35. Now the supplier was willing to supply certain quantity at 30 rupees, while the buyer was willing to buy that quantity. Now at 35, buyer would be willing to buy less quantity, while on the other hand supplier was still willing, because he would still still be getting 30 rupees, and that 5 is going to the government. So that supplier was better off at that point where the price was 30, because his break-even point maybe, and his profit was defined on that price and that quantity. So actually it distorts the market equilibrium, and it might create an inefficiency in the whole system. So that is how taxes affect, one of the another ways that taxes affects us. Then there is distribution of income. Now it is actually when my income is taxed, that would mean my real income has decreased. The amount that I could spend earlier, now I can spend less. Real income would mean that the amount that I could have spent without that tax is now less than what I can spend now. So it affects the distribution of income in terms of because distribution of income, in a sense that if my income is taxed, that might mean that that amount is being given to somebody, or maybe in some use of the government. But the whole point is that the distribution of income has changed, and I could have earned, I could have spent more amount than after tax than what I have, what I can spend right now after having that tax. And since the taxes also not only affects my income, they also affects the prices and amounts of private goods and services, just like we discussed in the last point of market equilibrium, that prices and quantities do change because of the taxes. So it changes the whole scenario of income distribution, because that is the income that was for that supplier that I am paying right now is also changing because of the tax. I could have paid more for that quantity, or he could have earned more revenue from my use of that product. So basically how much we tax affects many things, but these are the three main things. Political equilibrium or political outcome, because based on the tax share or based on the taxes that I have, I might choose differently in terms of that would affect my voting behavior directly. And second thing is market equilibrium is distorted because of taxes, and taxes on products specifically, and that would mean that quantity and prices that were the efficient outcome of the market are not being realized right now, because taxes have distorted that equilibrium, and it might result into inefficiency. We have seen certain cases before while discussing the role of the government, but we would look at them specifically in terms of the taxes right now, different types of taxes and their effects. And then there is again the distribution of income, which is affected because of the taxes. Now distribution of income in a sense that whenever my income is taxed, what I was supposed to spend, what I could have spent, now I cannot, because some part of income has been taken away by the government. And again I am also affected because of the government tax on products that would result into the prices and quantities which are above or below the market equilibrium, and that is again affecting the distribution of income. Now taxes are basically compulsory payments to the government that are required to be made. We discussed this scenario earlier, that allocation while deciding an outcome, whether it would be good to consider when for example a public good is required to be provided, it can be through voluntary outcome, which was like Lend-Hall's equilibrium, through which every individual would automatically express that this is my marginal benefit for the use of this product, and this is how much actually I would be willing to pay. But when the communities grow larger, it is very difficult to consider that any individual people would be considering strategic behavior, and they might be not expressing their marginal benefit in a true sense, and there would be free riders also, either who won't be paying for that, or who would be expressing their marginal benefit less than what it is supposed to be. So in smaller communities, that is an ideal scenario that can be possible, but in larger communities, when communities grow large and become cities or provinces or countries, it becomes very difficult to ensure that every individual might be paying just based on their marginal benefit. So the result would be, now you see that we are linking all the stuff that we had before to this, because that is why I enforced those things again and repeated those things again and again, because they would be used again and again. We would keep on using the same terminologies and same concepts because they are very important and they are applicable in every scenario. Now then, so the other outcome that the other solution that we had was that the government could apply a tax, a compulsory payment on every individual for the use of that public good. So this is what taxes are for, because you cannot depend on individuals to voluntarily express the marginal benefit they derive out of certain good. And secondly, marginal benefit is a downward sloping curve, plus the marginal benefit is in a sense a little intrinsic. For example, the marginal benefit I might derive from the use of national defense might be different from the marginal benefit you would be deriving from national defense. So maybe if I'm paying the higher price and maybe I'm paying the lower price and you are paying the higher price, now that would be in the context that I would be objecting that why, for example, if I'm paying the higher price, why is he paying the less price? So taxes are a unanimous outcome out of that, where every individual pays based on their income maybe, or based on the use of a certain product, or so they are compulsory payments by the government. Now what taxes do is that they reallocate resources. Now individuals, they reduce an individual's ability to command the resources that they have. My resource, for example, is my income which I earn. Now when the government tax that income, they reduce my ability in terms of my command on my resource. So that ability to command my resource is reduced, because now I have lesser resources, and it is very clear that some part of that resource that I earn is taken away by the government. But then why the government takes it away? These revenues are the resources are collected for broadly two purposes. One is bidding on resources for production, because now government, when, as we said, that government needs to provide national defense, or to hold, for example, you can say various you can say seminars or display of their products with international communities, or hold fairs, you can say defense fairs or fairs of Pakistan's products in Pakistan, or to provide roads and infrastructures and bridges and dams. For all of that, government needs resources, and those resources that they acquire in terms of taxes are then used to bid on the resources again that the government, for example, the tax money that the government collects, that money, those finances are used to bid on resources for production of public goods and services, for production of defense, for production of protection, for production of protection from fire, for provision of healthcare facilities, and all of that is required to be financed, and government bids on resources to provide and to produce goods and services. And secondly, they also use the tax funds to provide subsidies and income support programs to various individuals of lower income level, on which we had extensive discussion before: housing subsidies, medical facilities, food stamps, unemployment funds, pensions. So there are so many activities that government needs to undertake. So for that they need resources, and they collect these resources for these two things. Number one is for production of goods and services, and number two is for providing income support, subsidies, and income transfer to various classes of individuals. While introducing government finance, let us turn on to, because we are discussing that tax is one of the major source of government finance, so let us discuss some certain basics of taxes, that what are taxes actually, and what taxes are, what basic terminologies are used while discussing the tax by the government. So one of the important term is the tax base. Now the tax base is actually the item on which or the activity that is to be taxed. We have often heard the terminology that the government should, instead of increasing the tax rate, a government should increase the tax base, and that is a context of in terms of reducing the shadow economy, but we would be discussing this stuff later. So there are broadly three basic type of tax bases. There is income, there is consumption, and there is wealth. Now if you see, all of them are related to each other, very closely related to each other. Income is what I earn actually in terms of my providing my services, for example, or maybe teaching. Through teaching I earn some certain income, and that is my income. Somebody would be for example getting paid for being in police force, somebody would be getting paid for being a firefighter, somebody would be paid for becoming a doctor or becoming an engineer, or maybe there is a laborer who constructs a house, there is a contractor, and there is a shopkeeper. So whatever he earns out of that activity, that is an earned income. So those incomes are again taxed, and that is one of the tax bases. Then there is consumption. Out of my total income, how much I consume, that is also very taxed. That is also taxed. Then there is wealth. Wealth is consumption is taxed in a sense that when I buy, for example, or bread or eggs or milk, or for example I watch television, and all those consumption of mine are taxed in one way or other, either in terms of direct consumption, direct taxes, or we'll come to that while discussing the sales tax and all that. Then there is taxes on wealth. Wealth is actually income plus certain assets that I hold for future, for uncertainties, and which I have saved. So those might be, for example, the car that I own, or house that I bought, or plots that people buy, and the shares that they invest in. So all that, or bonds that they have. So all those would be the total wealth of an individual. So you see, out of income, either I consume or I save, and out of the money that I save, I buy assets, and that would mean that income, consumption, and wealth are very closely related to each other. If my income increases, then my consumption might increase, as well as my consumption and my wealth might increase, because when I buy more assets, my wealth also increases. So these are the three main tax bases. A tax that is generally, a general tax is basically it taxes all the bases. A general tax can be a tax of a general kind, for example. That would be, this is the amount of that tax that everybody has to pay. So that would be a tax on income, consumption, and wealth, a general tax, for example. Like there is a general sales tax. Now that is a sales tax on all the consumption, all the type of consumption. That's why it is called a general sales tax. Then there are selective taxes. Now taxes that either for example on a certain portion of a tax base is a selective tax. The difference between general taxes, selective taxes, that a selective tax, if it taxes all my income, then it would be a general tax on income. If it taxes all my consumption, then it would be like general sales tax, it would be a general tax. If it taxes all my wealth, it would be a general wealth tax. But then if it taxes a certain portion of that base, that would be for example a selective tax. For example, excise tax on production and sale of goods is a specific type of a tax. It is taxing one of the bases and some part of the bases. Then there is property tax. Now property is one of the parts of the wealth, so property tax is again a selective tax on only the property which is a part of general wealth category, so only a portion of the base is being taxed. Then there is tax on profit, is again a type of a tax which is only a part of only on part of the income, which is the profits are part of the income. So for example, if I own certain shares and for example there are capital gains on that, so that would be specifically wealth. But if I pay dividends, for example, if dividends are taxed, so that is part of my profit that coming to me, and if that profit is being taxed, so it is a selective type of an income. It is not my total income, but a part of my income. Then there is a tax structure that we need to consider, tax rate structure. Basically, the relationship between the amount that is to be paid in tax and the tax base for a given accounting period is tax rate structure. It is basically, in simpler words, it is the relationship between, for example, there is a total tax base, and out of that total tax base I pay certain amount as a tax, and that relationship, tax amount that is being paid as a tax divided by the value of total base, is actually the tax rate structure. Tax rate structure is actually discussed in two basic terminologies. One is average tax rate and the other one is marginal tax rate. Average tax rate is the total amount of tax divided by the total amount of the tax base. Average tax rate, in you can see the formula on the screen. Average tax rate is the tax paid, total tax paid on that base, where for example that base is maybe it is an income tax. So if I pay, for example, 10 rupees on a total of income of 100 rupees, so that would be a 10%. So the average tax rate would be, or that would be, the amount would come up to be 10. 100 by that, the amount would come up to 0.1. So that would be the average tax rate. So tax paid divided by the total value of the base is average tax rate. Now the change in tax paid divided by the change in income would be the marginal tax rate. Marginal tax rate is just like any other marginal concept of marginal. Marginal is what would be the addition would affect. So 1 more rupee in my income would induce how much more tax on that. For example, if I had 100 income before and it was taxed at certain amount, maybe I paid a tax of 10 at 10%. So now that would mean that if what would be if my income increases by 10 rupees, now my income is 110, how much would I be taxed? And that would be marginal tax. So marginal tax is increase in the tax income due to increase in the base. So it is represented by change in the tax paid divided by change in the value of the tax base. So that is the marginal tax rate, the amount by which the tax increases when the tax base increases, in simpler words. So the second thing is the tax bracket. Tax bracket is the range of tax base in which the marginal tax rate is constant. That would mean in Pakistan the taxation is again based on tax brackets. For example, the tax rate can be 10% on individuals with income from 10,000 to 30,000. This is a tax bracket. Now as soon as individual crosses that bracket, he increases to 31,000. From 31,000 to 50,000, the tax rate is, for example, 15%. So these are two different brackets. So in a given bracket, the tax, the range of tax base, given range, for example, which I defined as 10,000 to 30,000, that is a tax range of the tax base. The marginal tax rate is constant if my income increases, because it would be 10%. But then if I change the tax bracket from one bracket to another bracket, the marginal tax rate would again change, because I would be in a higher tax bracket. Now there are basically three descriptors of the tax structure. There is a progressive tax, there is a proportional tax, and there is a regressive tax. The progressive tax is that with increase in income, the tax rate actually increases. So while in for example a proportional tax is that the certain proportion of the income is taxed no matter what is the tax bracket. In progressive taxation they have various tax brackets, while in proportional tax a certain amount of income is to be taxed, and no matter what the size of the income is. So, and regressive taxes, as your income increases, the rate of tax reduces, while in progressive taxation, as your income increases, the rate of taxation increases, while in proportional tax the rate of tax stays constant. So it has directly implications for marginal tax and average tax also. A progressive tax, in which the tax rate increases with increase in income, tax structure has where the marginal tax rate is increasing and greater than the average tax rate. while in proportional tax, where there is a general amount of tax which is on the every level of income. In fact, the tax rate does not change with increases in income. Then marginal tax rate and average tax rate are equal and constant to each other. Then there is regressive tax, where the marginal tax rate is decreasing and it is less than the average tax. Regressive tax is the one where the amount taxed with increase in income actually decreases. We would see them in graphical format also, all three of them. First of all, the proportional tax rate. The proportional tax rate is the one in which increases in income does not increases the tax rate. So we have a graph of it to now you would be more clear on that. On the x-axis there is tax base dollars per year, the amount earned, for example, income. Assume this is an income tax. So we are discussing a proportional income tax rate right here, the structure of it. So on the x-axis there is an income tax, and on the y-axis there is the tax rate. Now the tax rate does not change with the income, so average tax and marginal tax remains constant. So that would mean that average tax and marginal tax would be parallel to x-axis and would be a straight line, and this shows the constancy of them and both of them being equal to each other. And T represents the amount of tax rate in percentage which is applied on various levels of income. And you see, the farther you move away from zero, the tax rate does not change. So that would mean that as your income increases, the tax rate is not affected by that increase in the income. Then there is progressive taxation. Progressive taxation is the one in which with increase in tax brackets the tax rate is increased. So marginal tax rate in this case is above the average tax rate in terms of progressive taxation. On the x-axis, assume again that there is taxable income in terms of dollars per year, and it is the tax base, actually the income that is to be taxed. Then on y-axis there is tax percentage. You can see over here is that with the increase in income from 4,000 to 29,000, the tax rate is, average tax rate is increasing, and marginal tax rate is constant within that bracket itself. So first bracket shown over here might be from 4,000 to 29,000. So within $4,000 and $29,000, the tax rate is 15%. Average tax rate increases with increase in income, but marginal tax rate is constant. It shows a straight line from 0 to 15 up to from 4,000, because income below 4,000 is not being taxed. So from 4,000 the marginal tax rate is 15, and it is constant up to 29,000. So that represents that marginal tax rate is constant within a tax bracket. From 29,000 to 70,000, that is the second tax bracket maybe in this case. So with that the average tax rate is increasing, but in this case again the marginal tax rate is 25, and that is again represented by a straight line starting from 29,000 to 70,000 in terms of marginal tax rate, and same goes on for above 70,000, then marginal tax rate would be constant. Now average tax rate is consistently increasing because, as I said, that the rate of tax would be changing with increases in income. So that is why it is called a progressive taxation system. Then there is a regressive taxation system in which the taxes are reduced with increase in income. Now we consider only two brackets over here. The average tax rate across the increase in income is decreasing. That shows that the rate of tax that is to be paid on the income decreases with increase in the income. So in this case marginal tax rate is again constant within a tax bracket. For example, the marginal tax rate for 0 up to 76,200 is constant at 15.30, while after 76,200 to 100,000 and onwards, the marginal tax rate is again constant at 2.9, and it is represented by a straight line. So in terms of regressive tax structure, marginal tax rate is below the average tax rate, and average tax rate is actually the amount that is paid out of tax and paid as a tax, and divided by the total value of the tax base, and its decrease shows that with increase in the earning, the amount being paid would be reduced. Now we come to the basic debate that how should the burden of government be financed. Now there are two basically broad principles in this debate. One is the benefit principle, that those who benefit most out of a government service should pay the higher tax, or any government program. That would be basically the Lindhall tax principle, which we discussed earlier in terms of marginal benefit. Now it is very difficult to evaluate the marginal benefit out of any government service, and how can you evaluate the benefit I gain from defense, or maybe from government's efforts to reduce pollution levels. So this benefit principle states that I should be taxed with the amount of the benefit that I gain from the use of that public good or services, or government good or service. Now then there are ways devised by some economists which can be used to evaluate the benefit principle. For example, now let us consider that all of us who drive the car uses the road. Now the individual who uses it more derives more benefit out of that road than the individual who uses the road less. So what can be the mechanism through which government can evaluate that benefit that I derive from the use of road, and how that benefit can be taxed? Now it can be an interesting, thought-provoking question. Now it has a very interesting solution to it. Now what we can do is, over here is, there is an example that fuel can be taxed to finance construction of road. Why specifically fuel can be taxed to finance construction of road? Now it is a very intelligent sort of for example, intelligent sort of proposal initiated by someone, but the point was that since the benefit I derive from the use of road is directly related to the number of times I use that road. So since my car which I derive runs on fuel, so that would mean if I'm using the road more, in that case I would be for example getting more fuel for my car. And if certain amount of tax is placed on fuel in such a way that that tax is to be collected for the construction of roads and maintenance of roads, then in that way they would be utilizing the benefit principle for taxation. You see the link over here, that I am driving the car on the road and my benefit is coming out of that road, the use of that government good. So if I'm deriving the benefit from the use of that road, my car is using fuel, so more I derive the benefit out of that car, the more I drive my car, and the more I derive my car, more fuel is required by that car. So in that sense, more fuel would can be taxed, and that would be a proxy for my benefit for use of that road, the benefit I derive from use of that road, and that benefit is being taxed actually. So they can put a fuel tax to finance constructions and maintenance of roads. But then there is there would be debates on this policy also, but I think that is a viable policy, because people might say that some cars consume more fuel than other cars, for example, or maybe a car worn out of an older model would be consuming more fuel than the car which is of the latest model, and it consumes less fuel, while both of the individuals might be using the road on at the same level, deriving the benefit out of the same level. And then there would be areas in which roads are not properly constructed yet. That is very specific to, for example, developing or underdeveloped country scenarios. Then those individuals would be taxed for the fuel also. Maybe you can constrain that fuel taxation on geographical grounds as well, so that you can ensure that where there is proper road network of the government, only those areas, fuel stations, are taxed for the use of in terms of fuel. But then that taxation taxation would again cause inefficiency in the market by, as we discussed earlier, that I am paying more amount and but the supplier is getting the same amount. So if the quantity is reduced, then that inefficiency would go toward the supplier, because he was planning to supply more quantity at that price, and which distorts the equilibrium, of course. Then there is ability to pay principle. Ability to pay principle would be which is actually reflected in terms of the progressive taxation scenario. Those who have the greatest ability to pay should be required to pay the most. So that is basically the scenario under the ability to pay. But who would judge the ability to pay? Because that is a very debatable scenario. You see, we while discussing the subject of public finance, wherever we land on certain normative principle, there is a debate arising each and every time, because ability to pay is very questionable. Because if for example you are able to pay more, then you earn that much status that you are able to pay more, and why should you be taxed more? Because reward should be according to the ability. The first debate revolves around this scenario, that reward should be according to the ability. So if you are taxed more according to your considering your ability, then that reward is being snatched out of you and it is being given to me who is not able to earn more. So so ability to pay principle is very debatable in itself, but it is mostly applied, like most of the progressive taxation mechanism that is even applicable in Pakistan, that represents the ability to pay scenario. Ability to pay would mean that higher your income is, higher the tax rate would be. But still, while we need to discuss this ability to pay scenario on various grounds. So first of the outcomes of ability to pay comes from the vertical equity and horizontal equity. What is equity actually? Equity is that people are at the same level. Now then, what is vertical equity and horizontal equity? Horizontal equity is that individuals of the same earning potential should be at the same level, should be treated same. That people with more economic ability should be paying more. That is the whole context of ability to pay. We would discuss this and we would debate this right here and then close this topic and then move on. Horizontal equity, same tax on people of same economic ability. Now, so in that sense, how would you judge the same economic ability? Would you judge it based on the income? So in that scenario, you would say that people on the similar level of income should be taxed at the same level. But then what would be the ability to pay? How would it be defined on various requirements of, for example, responsibilities? For example, if I have a loan to pay to somebody, for example, if I have 3 mouths to feed, and an individual of the same income level has only himself to take care of, and he has no loan to pay, then how both of us can be taxed on the same level, because our abilities to pay are different. So if you make the total level of income as you can say the parameter, defining parameter to define that two individuals are of the same ability, then what would be about the responsibilities? If I have like 2 younger brothers to take care of, if I have my older parents to take care of, and there is somebody who has the same income level and he does not have those responsibilities, I'm paying like some loan out of my salary also, then what would be the ability to pay for both of us? Because in my view, my ability would be less than his ability. So how can you make income as the parameter for ability to pay, and then we call it the horizontal equity? Then what if, for example, there are two individuals, and one of the two individuals of equal, for example, intellectual level, equal IQ, and both of them are doctors, for example, and one of the doctors works for like 9 or 10 hours in his office, and of course there is income that he earns which is much more, and there is a doctor, for example, the other one, who spends most of the time in leisure and going to, for example, trips to Dubai or Hawaii, or for example, or recreation, or playing golf and spending time with his family, and because he is well off from he has other sources of income, might be not just maybe he has wealth sources or other, but his income being earned is much less because he only works for 4 hours, and he only has to take care of himself, and the other doctor has to take care of many other individuals, too many mouths to feed. So their income, this doctor's income would be greater because he is working more hours, and that doctor's income would be less because he is working less. So if their abilities are same, what ability are you taxing as such? If are you taxing the income that is being earned, or are you actually taxing the ability to pay concept? Because ability to pay concept would be ability of a certain individual to pay back to the government for the use of the services for the government. So the other guy, the other doctor who enjoys more leisure time, he would be earning less just because he is having more leisure, and this guy would be earning more just because he is giving more time to work. Then what would be the question on what would be the ability to pay in this scenario? So you see, on normative principles, it is a very big debate. The ability to pay is very questionable as such, and the only proxy that is used by the government for ability to pay is how much income that is earned, and that might be unfair to many individuals, because ability to pay is not the income that you earn, it is actually what you can actually pay, or what you are able to pay to the government in the first example, or how much you can earn might be a measure of the ability to pay, and you are choosing not to earn that income. So horizontal equity based on treating individuals on the equal grounds, but then economic behavior is something very difficult. There are always laws of physics, as I said, that laws of physics that define very simple principle, that if you push two different 10 kg weights with certain force, they would move the similar distance. But then within social sciences, there are certain debates like this one which are not based on certain laws and principles, and we discussed that certain individuals, because certain government principles, out of voting outcomes, there would be individuals who would be suffering because the policies are to be standardized. The only solution in this scenario in terms of ability to pay would be income. No doubt I raised the debate myself. I could have ignored that and put it to the side, but the reason is to evoke that thought process in your minds through which you can evaluate various actions by the government, not just on positive economic principles but also on normative grounds as well. Then after discussing the horizontal equity, we would be discussing the vertical equity. People with differing economic ability pay different levels of taxes based on some norm of fairness, because it is fair on the grounds that people earning more should pay more and people earning less should pay less. Now, as income increases, the marginal benefit to dollar decreases, but by how much? This is the first question. And the second question is, does it actually fall for someone who fears future inability to work? So let me explain these points. Now, vertical equity is basically that people with differing levels of economic, you can say, ability might pay differently. People with higher economic ability would pay higher, and people with low economic ability would pay lower. Now this is based on certain norm of fairness. Let's assume that this is treated as fair right now, that this is fine. We do not question the main concept that I discussed earlier, that reward equal to ability. If somebody has earned more because of he is able to earn more, then he should not be penalized for that, and he should not be taxed excessively for that. So but that was a scenario, that is a debate again. So now, ignoring that, assuming that now we are treating this as fair for now, that individual earning more should be taxed more, no on humanitarian grounds, basically, that because they can finance activities of the government towards poor and towards elderly, so they let us consider this fair for now. It is actually fair from Islamic perspective specifically, not from this the science perspective that we live in nowadays, but still. So let's assume that vertical equity is treated as fair right now. So what would happen is, now let us consider that we know that as income increases, the marginal benefit to each dollar earned decreases with that. But the question is that by how much? Would it be same for everybody, or would it be different for people? So the debate basically over here is that if marginal benefit of income decreases, then by how much, and that would define that how much extra additional tax burden should be placed on that individual. And for example, $1,000 would be worth a lot for me, and but the $1,000 for maybe you can say Mark Zuckerberg or Donald Trump or some other billionaire maybe in Pakistan or in any other country would be nothing. So would that mean that if that $1,000 is worth nothing for that individual, so he should be taxed more? And if yes, then by how much amount should he be taxed more, so that we can tax him as much as possible based on what would be the norm of fairness in that sense? How much marginal tax rate should be increased on those individuals? And what if does it actually mean that if he is earning more, then maybe considering any future catastrophe, he would be considering that I might be sick in the future, I might fall ill because of certain disease, I might become disabled because of certain complexity in my body, and I would be not able to earn more. So he is working hard enough so that he is earning more right now, maybe he can, so that he can sustain his life of retirement or life of disability. Maybe he is earning more because of that, and just considering that scenario, that people earning more should be taxed based on the concept of norm of fairness, would actually be unfair itself. So by how much actually determining the precise number of dollars that each taxpayer would have to pay for equal sacrifice is very difficult. Now vertical equity would mean that everybody should make the equal sacrifice. An individual earning for example 1,000 rupees should make a sacrifice from his income, the one he is able to make. An individual earning for example an income of 500,000 should make an equal sacrifice considering his level of income. So but then what would be the level of that equal sacrifice? Who would define that level of equal sacrifice? So the whole debate over equity in terms of taxation causes a very you can say places you on a difficult normative ground where ethics and morals and because certain things are very difficult to measure, and this ability to pay itself is very difficult to measure. It is not just the income that is taken as the measure of ability to pay. It might be individuals' desire for future resources, individuals' responsibilities, and individuals resources that he might require in the future. All of this scenario, and the marginal benefit he associates to that additional dollar, because if in terms of giving that dollar that would be a cost to him, and marginal benefit would be keeping that dollar or earning that dollar. So if marginal cost is above marginal benefit, then that individual would be worst off in that scenario. But then again discussing this, the whole story revolves around the fact that standards are required to be maintained and made. It is not possible in terms of the considering that Lind-Hall equilibrium is applicable on each and every individual, and everyone would pay just out of their sheer desire to pay. That would mean that it would be very difficult to consider that every individual would be willing to express his marginal benefit, and you just take the tax out of that individual, unless there is an equipment attached to his hand that would measure the marginal benefit that he is deriving from the use of that product. So it becomes very difficult to evaluate evaluate such type of scenarios, the effects of taxation on the fairness of tax system based on the ability to pay becomes very complicated, and it becomes more complex in the sense that when taxes are paid, they do not only reduce my command over the resources, but it also affects me through products and through distortion in equilibrium in the supply of products and services, the supply quantity supplied and demanded of products and services. And the taxes are not just on the prices and quantities, they are again on the inputs and outputs in terms of the labor market and other inputs that are required for production process. So these tax systems are distorting. These taxes actually distort market equilibrium and my command of my resources, and it affects me from both sides actually. So assessing fairness of a tax system based on the ability to pay is just considering the ability to pay is very complicated. We might be running out of time, so in the next lecture we would try to devise a criteria over which we can evaluate, assess the fairness of the tax system. I hope you stay with this, you come in the next lecture with this same debate and the thought that I have tried to originate in your mind or create in your mind, that the taxation system, vertical equity and horizontal equity and the ability to pay and the benefit principle actually defines the tax system. Why all of this debate is so important? Because as I discussed earlier, that these are what taxes affect is market equilibrium and income distribution as well as the political equilibrium. So it is very important that we have this debate in our mind when we are evaluating various tax systems and various taxes, and we should be able to evaluate the taxation of the government in a broader sense, considering all the aspects. So we started over here in the today's lecture. Now I would be summarizing the whole lecture just for 5 minutes now, so that then you guys can go free. It's not that you cannot go free right now, you can just pause and go, but still this is what I usually say to my class, that when I summarize the lecture, I say okay, I summarize the lecture and then you guys can go free, but the same context won't be applicable to you, because you can just click pause and stop me right there and then move on. It would be very interesting to see myself over there, but still we discussed that there are 3 tiers of government, basically federal, state and local. In case of Pakistan, there are federal governments, provincial governments and local bodies. And we discussed the fundamental difference between government goods and the market goods that are provided in the market, and the price is actually the method of rationing the quantity being supplied. But in case of government goods and services, there are taxes, and there is a link missing while making that payment, and they are not the prereq of utilization of those services. So it becomes a difficult thing to evaluate, and the sources are basically the taxes. There are the various types of taxes which we have discussed twice, I guess. This would be the 3rd time already. And then fees and tuitions and licenses. Now moving on, we discussed how much we are taxed actually affects, what does it affect? It affects the political equilibrium, it affects the market equilibrium, and it affects the income distribution. It affects political equilibrium in a sense that we discussed, we had a great debate and detailed lectures on the scenario that when there is a tax share on an individual, then based on that tax share and his marginal private benefit and marginal private cost, he evaluates the next his voting choice. So obviously taxes affect the political equilibrium. Then they affect the market equilibrium and efficiency, because if certain tax is placed on a certain product, then the price of that product would increase for me, and the supplier would be actually getting the same amount of revenue, and then certain amount would be taken by the government out of which. Now if the supplier is getting the same amount of revenue, then if the quantity is reduced because of higher price towards me, then the supplier would have to supply a lesser quantity, and that would mean that his revenue would decrease. and then it would obviously affect the market and efficiency as well. Then there is distribution of income, because it reduces the command over my resources, and that would mean that I am directly affected by some part of my income has been taken away from me, and then I'm again affected in a sense that market equilibrium has been disturbed. So that would mean that prices and amounts of goods and services would change out of the most efficient outcome. Now taxes are treated as a compulsory payment, and they result into a resource allocation. Resource allocation, why? Because the taxes reduces the command over my resources that I have. And then what are these taxes used for? The reallocation would be collecting from me and then allocating them in some sector, maybe building a dam. Then if the government is building a dam, then it would that would be a good provided to the economy as a whole, and for that the government would get a payment out of me and allocate that payment to bid for the resources for construction of that dam and maintenance of that dam. So, and plus the government would also be providing subsidies and income support to various classes of individuals. So that would be reallocating resources from one area to the other area automatically. Then we started with the basics of the tax, and in order to discuss that, we started with the tax base. Tax base is basically the item or the activity that is being taxed. There are broadly three tax bases. There is income, consumption and wealth. I discussed over here that all of them are very closely related to each other, because my income defines that out of my income how much I consume and how much I save, and out of that I also, the amount I save, I also buy wealth from it. So that would mean that all three are very closely related to each other. Then the taxes can be a general type of tax. That can be, for example, general sale tax can be a general tax on all the sales proceeds for all the goods. And then it can be a selective tax. General tax would actually try to tax the whole base, while the selective tax would try to tax a part of that base, and that would be, for example, the profit tax. Profit tax would be a part of my income, but only the profit part of my income is being taxed, so a part of the base is taxed. Then there can be excise duties, excise tax on production and sale of goods. Then there can be property tax, which is a part of my wealth, and only certain part of my wealth is being taxed. Now then we discuss the tax rate structure. It is the relationship between the tax paid and the total value of the base. There is average tax rate, which is tax paid divided by the value of the base. There is marginal tax rate, which is change in tax paid divided by the change in tax base. That if the tax base increases, how much the tax rate increases, that would be marginal tax rate. If tax rate in tax base increases by 1 unit, or and then how much units would cause and would be the increase in the tax rate, and that would be marginal tax rate. Then I discuss the tax brackets, which are very obvious. The various brackets of income that are created, that they would be almost taxed at the same rate. There is progressive tax along within a tax bracket. Actually the marginal tax rate remains constant, not the average tax rate. There are three types of taxation structures that are used. There is progressive tax, there is proportional tax, and there is regressive tax. Progressive tax is one where marginal tax rate is above the average tax rate, and that is the area, that the reason is that the average tax rate is continuously increasing within outside the tax bracket. It is different brackets are taxed at different rates. And then there is a proportional tax rate. There it is a lump, it is basically a specific tax rate at which is applied to all levels of income, for example, and at this proportional tax, marginal tax rate and average tax rate are constant. Then there is regressive tax rate, in which marginal tax rate is below the average tax rate, and regressive tax rate is the one in which the tax rate reduces with increase in income. Now this is a graph for a proportional tax rate, in which it was shown that average tax rate and marginal tax rate remains constant. This is a graph for a progressive tax rate, in which marginal tax rate remains constant within a bracket, but average tax rate is increasing. This is a graph for regressive tax rate. Regressive tax rate is the one in which marginal tax rate is below the average tax rate. Now the question was that how the government finance should be, how the burden of government finance should be placed. One would be the benefit principle, another one would be ability to pay principle. The benefit principle is basically how much benefit that you are deriving out of use of a product, and actually that benefit, if individual is deriving more benefit, he should be taxed more than the individual who is not deriving that much benefit. An example of this would be the use of road. For example, if I use road more, I should be taxed more for the use of that road. One idea is to place a toll on that road, just like on the motorways, but not every day I use, like for example, intercity roads are also financed by the government. So how can they define a tax rate so that my benefit can be extracted, the use of that, for the use of that road? So what they can do is, a proposed idea over here was the fuel tax. More I use a road, more tax I pay, more fuel is used. So a tax can be placed on fuel, and that can be used for maintenance and construction of roads. That would be the benefit principle, an example of the benefit principle. Then we started the debate with ability to pay. There was a very complex debate, because I was the only debater. I had to tell you the both sides of the scenario. Ability to pay is related to how much an individual can pay, should be paying. So there are two types of equity, horizontal equity and vertical equity. Horizontal equity is that individuals of two similar economic ability should be paying the similar amount as a tax, and vertical equity is that individual who is able to pay more should be paying more than the individual who can pay less. So vertical equity, horizontal equity was also debated, in a sense that ability to pay is very questionable if considered income, if income is considered as the ability of an individual to pay. And we discussed two examples, one with for example, an individual has two individuals has same level of income, but one of them has greater responsibility, then what would be the ability to pay in that sense? And if two individuals are of the same economic ability, but one of them is choosing more leisure time, then would you pay the individual who's working harder? Would you tax him more? So that is again a debate over ability to pay in terms of horizontal equity. Then in vertical equity, there is again a debate. As income increases, the amount of marginal benefit to the dollar reduces. So that would mean that individuals with higher income can pay more tax, but by how much? How would you, what would be the rate by which you would increase their tax? So would they pay like 20 or 30% more than an individual who's earning less? So then there is also a debate over the scenario that maybe he is saving for some future catastrophe that he anticipates. So if he is earning more, should he have to pay tax more than the individual who's earning less? So vertical equity was again debated over here. And then I said in the end, in the last slide, was that assessing fairness of a tax system based on an ability of an individual to pay is very complicated, and as we discussed in terms of horizontal and vertical equity. So and it even becomes more complex, considering that government's taxation distorts the prices and quantities of outputs and inputs that are sold in the market. So there is a whole broader effect in the economy going on. So how would you assess the fairness of a tax system? So we would try to establish certain criteria in the coming lecture, where we would be discussing the fairness of taxation. I hope the scenario, whole government revenue and government finance thing has become interesting for you. So if you please do stay interested to so that you can get as much out of these contents as possible. Hope to see you soon. Take care. Allah Hafiz.